Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. And in this one, we're going to go through 5 of my hot takes for the 2026 season. This is always a really fun video for me. It's a good opportunity for me to sort of present some of my more extreme opinions that, of course, should have a relatively low chance of actually turning out to be true, but that I've actually got a pretty good track record on and have been pretty successful by betting on these hot takes in the past. We'll start by covering the hot takes from last season so you guys can understand that it seems like I might actually be onto something with some of these. And then we'll get into 5 hot takes that, again, should have a low probability of hitting, but that if they do, will be really actionable outcomes for you guys to really go into your fantasy drafts with. So hopefully you guys enjoy. If you guys have any hot takes of your own, any questions or comments, let me know in the comments below. Love interacting with you guys there. And yeah, like I said, hopefully you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. So just to give you guys a lay of the land in terms of how well we did on this last year, we went 5 for 5. These, again, like I said, all 5 of these things should have been very low probabilities of success, and we actually ended up going 5 for 5 across the board there. The hot takes from last season were as follows. Tyler Warren, finishing as a top 4 tight end, was drafted as like the tight end 9 at the time of recording, finished as the tight end 4, so cracked in there. I said George Pickens would finish as a top 12 wide receiver. He was drafted outside the top 20 last season, and if you drafted him, you know that obviously was phenomenal for your fantasy season. I said that Jalen Waddle would outscore Tyreek Hill last season. You could argue I got a little bit lucky there with the injury to Tyreek Hill, but the fact of the matter was that was a big part of why we weren't betting on Tyreek Hill. It was more of a anti-Tyreek Hill argument than a pro-Jalen Waddle argument, so we certainly provided good insight on that one. The 4th hot take last year was that Breece Hall would finish outside the top 20 at the position. Technically finishes the running back 21 in points per game, so just barely finished with that one. But again, he was drafted inside the top 15. It was actionable advice to not draft Breece Hall last season. And then, so believe it or not, this was a hot take last season. The hot take was that Jalen Warren would outscore Caleb Johnson. I understand that seems crazy to consider the fact that that was a hot take last season, but Caleb Johnson was like a 6th round draft pick. Jalen Warren was more of like a 10th round draft pick. So that was a hot take. And obviously, if you drafted any Caleb Johnson, you burned a draft pick. And if you drafted Jalen Warren, you got yourself a running back 2 for free. So somehow went 5 for 5 last year. We're going to try and top that this year. Can't really top it, but we'll try and at least match it. And we'll see what we can do. So let's get into the first hot take here. So my first hot take for this year is going to be that Kenneth Walker will finish this season as a top 5 running back. To cover my ass a little bit, I'll say he'll finish as a top 5 running back in fantasy points per game, just because, we'll probably see him miss 2 to 3 games at some point in the season. So maybe he doesn't quite squeak into the top 5 overall, but currently he's going as the running back 11 by ADP. And I think you could make a compelling argument for Kenneth Walker to potentially be your running back 3. I don't think you can really argue for him over Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs, but outside of that, it's pretty murky with Christian McCaffrey going into his age 30 season. Jonathan Taylor tied to a Colts offense we're not super excited about. James Cook just doesn't seem to be super involved in the passing game, although hopefully that'll change this season. There's an argument to be made that Kenneth Walker could easily crack the top 3 at the position this year. I've talked about it before, but Andy Reid has a long-standing history of producing top 5 fantasy running backs every single time that he's got a legitimate talent at the position. Go back to 2006 through 2008, you had Brian Westbrook finishes the running back 4, running back 1, and running back 8. 2010 and 2011, you had LaShawn McCoy finishes the running back 4 and the running back 2. 2013 and 2014, you had Jamal Charles as the running back 1 and running back 7. And then in 2017 and 18, you had Kareem Hunt finishes the running back 4 in each of those 2 seasons. So that's a pretty solid history of, if you look back at every single time Andy Reid has actually had a guy that he wanted to trust as his bell cow running back, that guy was a top 5 fantasy running back outside of a running back 7 and a running back 8 finish. We're looking at a total of 9 years here, and only 2 of those guys didn't finish inside the top 5. And it's not like they missed by much, right? You got running back 7 and running back 8 seasons out of Jamal Charles and Brian Westbrook. That'd be totally fine. So Kenneth Walker was the only move this Chiefs offense made this offseason. He is going to be really the face of the offense here. You've got Mahomes in line to start week 1. We love to see that. He's obviously going to be better for the offense than Justin Fields. But he's coming off a torn ACL. They're going to want to lean on the run game, play defense. They've talked a lot about wanting to use Kenneth Walker as a great part of the screen game, and it makes a lot of sense, right? He's really good after the catch, and it just makes sense for them to do everything they can to get him the ball in open space. This is the best offensive line Kenneth Walker's ever been a part of, probably the best offensive scheme he's ever been a part of. I'm super excited for Kenneth Walker. I think he'd easily go out there should easily be a top 5 running back here. Top 3 is in the range of outcomes. Could even scratch into the top 2 or 1 even if things break completely right. So I'm drafting a lot of Kenneth Walker this season. I think the upside's just insane. And of course, injury is always a risk, but any player can get hurt. I'm willing to take that risk. I feel great about Kenneth Walker this season. We're maybe going to get a little bit spicier here, but I'm going to say that Kenneth Gainwell will outscore Bucky Irving in 2026. For context, Bucky Irving is currently being drafted as the running back 21, while Gainwell is going as the running back 39. So that's a pretty hot take, right? You got almost a 20 positional ADP difference. And the main thing really is just that Kenneth Gainwell was a better player than Bucky Irving last season. Let's just look at yards per touch. We saw Kenneth Gainwell average 5.5 yards per touch versus 4.3 for Bucky. You add in the fact that Gainwell was just, in general, on a much worse offense, and the fact that he was still more efficient, that's something to be super excited about. You've also got significantly better weapons around Kenneth Gainwell now that he's in Tampa than what he had in Pittsburgh, meaning that he should be even more effective on a per-touch basis. He was given a legitimate 2-year deal to be the new Rachaad White, and the fact of the matter is he's a much better player than Rachaad White. He's way more explosive. He can do more in the running game than Rachaad White could. He's a legit competitor for touches in this backfield, and that's not something that Bucky Irving had to deal with while Rachaad White was there. Basically, what that means is that we know that Bucky's just not going to be a full-time player, even if he is healthy. It just doesn't make any sense for them to give him a huge workload. He's had a hard time staying healthy when given a ton of touches, and I think that it's very fair to say that Gainwell, at a minimum, is better than Bucky Irving in the passing game, which is certainly something that Baker Mayfield excels at, right? He's always incredibly efficient in terms of his completion percentage to the running back position, loves hyper-targeting the running back position as well. You think of Baker Mayfield playing, you can picture play after play of him escaping a sack and getting the ball out to Rachaad White or Bucky Irving. You're going to see a lot of that to kind of Kenneth Gainwell this season. And the main thing, too, is as much as I'm super high on Kenneth Gainwell, this makes me anti-Bucky Irving as well. I think that you're looking at a situation with Bucky where he could be a sort of frustrating between the 20s only kind of running back. You've got Gainwell obviously coming in all the passing down roles, and then Sean Tucker is a big-bodied back. He could certainly come in there and steal some goal line work. And when you're dealing with a running back that's only getting first and second down between the 20s, it's tough to be super reliable for fantasy. You need Bucky Irving to hit off a big play, and those are not super reliable. So I think Gainwell is going to be a super reliable asset every single week. A guy you can pretty much play as a low-end running back too. And I think Bucky Irving's got a much lower floor than people are giving him credit for. So advice from this one is draft Kenneth Gainwell, fade Bucky Irving, and I do think there's a chance that Gainwell could just outscore Bucky this season. The third hot take for the 2026 season is going to be that Parker Washington will finish as a top 20 wide receiver this season. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 31 by ADP, so I think he's got a shot to finish at least 11 spots higher than that. And honestly, that might be too conservative. He was the wide receiver 11 over the back half of last season. That's from week 9 onward. And all the training camp reports have been nothing but spectacular. It sounds more and more like this guy is the true number one on this passing offense. You add in the fact that Liam Cohen has a very, very long history of just hyper-targeting the slot position in his offenses. You can go back to Cooper Kupp in Los Angeles, Chris Godwin back when he was in Tampa, and then Parker Washington last season, right? So this is a guy that is incredibly talented. He fits the scheme for Liam Cohen. We expect this offense in Jacksonville to improve significantly going into year 2. Just we see it every year. Year 2 offenses do much better in the system than they do in year 1, just on average. And that makes it very reasonable to assume that this offense should be a lot better going into year 2. Parker Washington's a full-time player. He's on an amazing offense. He's an incredibly talented player. Being able to find what I believe is the clear wide receiver 1 in a really good offense is the wide receiver 31 by ADP. I think Parker Washington could maybe even finish as a wide receiver 1 this season. I know that sounds crazy, but again, this dude was the wide receiver 11 over the back half of last year. He was a wide receiver 1 for over a half season. That's a legitimate sample size. And he wasn't even really I don't think we've seen the best of Parker Washington. He's still a young player. He's going into year 4. This is a contract year for him. I know they talked a lot about extending him this offseason. They haven't done it yet, right? So this dude's playing for a huge contract. He's going to earn it this season. I think he's a phenomenal player. And I haven't even talked about the fact that both Brian Thomas and Jacoby Myers are already dealing with injuries. Not that I think any of those injuries are serious, but it just makes it even more clear that Parker Washington's the clear lead dog in this offense. He's going to see a ton of volume on a really good offense. He's a really good player. I feel just fine if he ends up being my wide receiver 2. And honestly, I think you can get him as your wide receiver 3, sometimes your wide receiver 4, depending on your build. And that's going to give you a ton of upside throughout the draft. So I'm drafting him everywhere. And I really do think you guys should be as well. And I'm going to double down on the Jaguars offense here for my hot takes this season and say that Trevor Lawrence will finish as a top 5 quarterback. He was the quarterback 10 by ADP right now, and that's despite finishing as the quarterback 1 after their week 8 bye last season. In year 2 in the offensive system, we should see another step forward here for Jacksonville. We see that every single year where these players go into year two. I talked about it when I was talking about Parker Washington. You see teams go into year two in a new system. It's why we're super excited about Ben Johnson and the Bears in Chicago. You just expect to see a step forward for the team now that they're more familiar with the system. The weapons have only gotten better. You've got Travis Hunter going into year two. Hunter wasn't even available over the back half of last season. Was also, a rookie that had to learn playing offense and defense at the same time. Would have been very reasonable to assume Hunter would have started slow. Brian Thomas Jr. can't be any worse than he was last season. You've got Jakobi Meyers actually getting a full offseason with the team. This is a dude who was effective for them despite getting traded mid-season. I've talked about Parker Washington. He's looking amazing. He could be a true superstar at the position. Brenton Strange looks great. They just gave him a big extension. He's clearly going to be a focal point of the offense. And the departure of Travis Etienne, or Etienne, but goes by Travis Etienne now, likely makes them more dependent on the passing game. You've got Bashal Tutin, Chris Rodriguez, LaQuint Allen. Neither one of those guys are guys that you're going to go into every single week looking to give the ball 20 plus times a game. And that means that the entire success of this offense is going to fall on the shoulders of Trevor Lawrence. We saw him rush at a career high rate last season. I don't think that's a fluke. We saw Baker Mayfield rushing at career high levels back with Liam Cohen. That's something that Liam Cohen wants his quarterbacks to do. And what that means is we've got legitimate quarterback one overall upside for Trevor Lawrence. I know that sounds insane, but again, the dude did it for over a whole half season of last year. He's a really good player. I think the top five of the positions pretty much wide open. You could easily say that, Josh Allen's going to finish as the quarterback one, but I can't confidently sit here and tell you that Lamar Jackson or Jaden Daniels or Drake May or Joe Burrow or Jalen Hurts or any of those guys are going to finish ahead of Trevor Lawrence. Joe Burrow gets hurt every single year. Lamar regressed seemingly a lot last season. Hopefully he's back, but who knows? Jaden Daniels had a really great rookie season that fell apart last year. Drake May maybe benefited from a great schedule last year. Jalen Hurts lost A.J. Brown. There's an argument to be made for all of those guys to potentially be below Trevor Lawrence here, and all he's got to do is outperform like one or two of them to squeak his way into the top five. So I feel really good about Trevor Lawrence, especially at the quarterback 10 off the board. The real takeaway here is I feel great waiting at quarterback and drafting him, and if he does finish as a top five guy, he's going to be the kind of pick that's going to make a huge difference in terms of your odds of winning your league this season. And I wanted to go a little bit deeper on the draft board for this one. So the final hot take for the season is going to be that Casey Concepcion finishes as a top 30 wide receiver in 2026. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 50 by ADP, so that's still a pretty big return on investment here. And by many scouts, he was perceived to be the wide receiver one in this year's draft class. When you talk about the draft class in general, you had obviously Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon, and then Casey Concepcion. Those were the only four players that really anyone came out and said had even a claim to potentially being the number one wide receiver in the class. And just because he was drafted latest in the draft does not mean that he's any worse than those players. It was a pretty clear tier one of the position, according to most scouts. Just looking at him in this offseason, he absolutely looks the part. He looks phenomenal. He's going to be a manufactured touch guy for sure, but they're moving him all over the field. This is not a guy that's going to be stuck in the slot. His competition for targets at the wide receiver position, it's fellow rookie Denzel Boston, who's had a good camp in his own right, but second round pick, not quite the same caliber of player as Casey Concepcion. And then Jerry Jeudy, who's just clearly not going to be ever turned into anything of really meaning in the NFL. Harold Fannon's obviously a threat, but Concepcion is just a more explosive player. He's a guy that they're going to want to look to every single time they need a big play. And because they're going to be moving him all over the field, manufacturing touches for him, looking just to get the ball to him in space, he's actually a lot less dependent on quarterback play than people are going to give him credit for. Denzel Boston, as like a true X wide receiver, likely needs one of those two quarterbacks in Watson or Shedeur to go out there and play pretty well for Boston to be decent for fantasy. But we saw it last season when you're a guy that gets hyper targeted and can do really well with the ball after the catch, like Harold Fanning could. You could be really good for fantasy, even though the quarterback play was absolutely horrendous. Casey Concepcion is similar in that they're going to do a lot of the same kind of manufacturing of touches for him, but he's just way better than Harold Fannin after the catch. That's not a slight to Harold Fannin. It's just that, you got an explosive wide receiver here that can take a screen pass to the house. Harold Fannin can't really do that. And just every time you hear the Browns talk about him, Casey Concepcion's a guy that they think is going to be a star. He's a future superstar in the NFL, according to them. And just watch him on film. Every single time he touches the ball, it's a big play waiting to happen. He's incredibly explosive. He just moves a little bit differently than a lot of other players in the field. And he gets Zay Flowers comps, but I think he's a much more explosive version of Zay Flowers. He's much better at breaking tackles. His contact balance is way better than what Zay Flowers offers. I think he's, I'd hate to say like an Antonio Brown comp, but he's a similar kind of player in that the size is deceiving in terms of just how big he plays. You could use Amon-Ra, but I think he's just more explosive than Amon-Ra. Not the same route runner, but he's just an elite athlete. That's a really talented player, and they're going to find ways to get the ball in his hands. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if at the end of this season, the rookie wide receiver that finishes with the most fantasy points in 2026 could legitimately be Casey Concepcion, and he's drafted 4th out of those guys. So I like him quite a bit. I'm drafting him almost everywhere. He's free in most drafts, and I think especially as we get to the back half of the season, Concepcion's going to be a guy that you're looking to start every single week. So I like him quite a bit, and I do recommend drafting him. So that'll do it for the hot takes for the 2026 season. Up next, we're going to go over a sort of new fun segment. I'm going to go over something I'll call overhyped or overlooked. I'm going to talk over all of the big training camp and preseason storylines that we're getting. The DeJon Stribling, the Giants backfield with Cam Scatabo, Pat Bryant really emerging in in the Broncos camp. All the storylines like that, I'm going to touch on them and just tell you whether or not I think those are getting overblown or whether or not they're still just not getting looked at enough. So that'll be a fun video as well. Going to keep putting out a ton of content, so hopefully you guys are subscribed to the channel. If you haven't already, please go do that. I can see that 75% of you guys who watch these videos aren't subscribed. Kind of hurts my feelings. If you're watching the videos anyway, you might as well be subscribed. Helps me out, and that'll keep you from missing any future content as well, because there's going to be a ton of it coming out. Basically doing a video every single day. I really want to get you guys as prepared as we can for your drafts, and I'm preparing myself, so I might as well be putting out content for you guys to get you guys ready to roll as well. So I appreciate you guys. If you made it this far in the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any hot takes of your own, let me know in the comments below. I love interacting with you guys there. It's part of what makes this so fun for me, and I will catch you guys with the next one. Peace, guys.